You can feel it, can't you? That subtle dissonance when someone's words don't match their energy. It's like listening to a song played slightly out of tune. Your brain knows something is wrong even if it can't name the sour note. You've been trained your entire life to listen to what people say, but the real story, the one that truly matters, is never spoken aloud. So, what if you could learn to hear the silent music playing underneath every conversation and finally understand what people are truly communicating? This isn't about learning cheap body language tricks or manipulative tactics. This is about developing a profound psychological insight, a way of seeing that pulls back the curtain on human nature itself. We're going to explore a framework inspired by one of history's most piercing observers of the human soul, Friedrich Nietzsche, to uncover the truths people reveal without ever intending to. This journey is broken into 3 distinct parts, and each one builds methodically on the last. Skipping a section will be like trying to read a novel by only reading the first, middle, and last chapters. You'll get the plot points, but you'll miss the soul of the story. By the end of our time together, you won't just see other people with breathtaking clarity. You'll finally come face to face with a stranger you know least of all, yourself. From our earliest days, we are taught to construct a self of public consumption. We learn to smile when we are sad, to agree when we are uncertain, and to project confidence when we are terrified. Nietzsche understood this not as a moral failing, but as a fundamental survival strategy. The personality you present to the world is not your essence. It is your shield, a carefully crafted mask designed to navigate the complex and often brutal social landscape. The person who is relentlessly cheerful may be warding off a private despair, while the person who seems aloof and arrogant might be using it as armor to protect a deeply sensitive and insecure core. They aren't lying to you. They are performing a role they believe is necessary to be accepted, to be safe, or simply to get through the day. The most profound part of this is that most people are completely unaware they are even wearing a mask. They have played the part for so long that the performance has become their perceived reality. This is why trying to read people by their words alone is a fool's errand. You are only reading the script. But the truth always finds a way to leak out, not in the grand speeches, but in the quiet margins. It's in the flicker of an eye, the nervous laugh that lasts a second too long, the subject they deftly avoid. Nietzsche's first profound truth is simply this: everyone wears a mask, not because they are inherently deceitful, but because they are fundamentally fragile. The mask is a testament to what they fear, what they long for, and what they feel they must hide to survive. Your first task is not to try and rip this mask off, but to simply acknowledge its presence. See the performance for what it is, a tool, and you can begin to look for the person underneath. Watch for the moments of tension, the subtle shifts when their performance is challenged. That's where the real story begins. Now, let's look at a second powerful truth, one that acts as a psychological mirror. What a person consistently and passionately criticizes in others is often a direct reflection of what they are hiding from in themselves. This is a concept of projection, and it is one of the most reliable clues to a person's inner world. When you meet someone who relentlessly attacks arrogance in others, who seems to find it under every rock and in every conversation, you are often looking at someone locked in a bitter struggle with their own feelings of inadequacy. They fight the specter of their own insecurity by trying to slay it in the outside world. Similarly, the person who is obsessed with pointing out the dishonesty of everyone around them is frequently wrestling with a truth they cannot bear to face about themselves. Our loudest condemnations are often confessions in disguise. So, to truly understand someone, don't just catalog what they praise. Pay far closer attention to what they despise. The energy they expend on their criticism tells you exactly where their own pain is buried. The third key is to understand the power of the unsaid. We live in a world saturated with noise, where everyone is encouraged to speak, to share, to have an opinion. Nietzsche, however, saw language not always as a tool for truth, but often as a smokescreen for the herd, a way to conceal reality behind a wall of agreeable or distracting sounds. The most revealing moments in any interaction are often the silences. When you ask a direct, emotionally charged question and are met with a noticeable pause, a sudden shift in topic, or a clipped, rehearsed answer, you are hearing something far louder than words. That pocket of silence is a space filled with everything they are afraid to say. It is a territory of their vulnerability, and their avoidance of it tells you everything you need to know about what they are protecting. The person who can't be still, who can't tolerate a quiet moment, is often running from something inside themselves. This leads us to the fourth truth, would concern the performance of morality. Be cautious around the person who makes a grand spectacle of their virtue. The one who is always the first to point out a moral failing in others, who constantly broadcasts their own integrity, charity, or righteousness, is often engaging in what Nietzsche identified as a disguised form of the will to power. In these cases, morality is not a guide for living. It is a weapon for establishing superiority. They don't seek to be good. They seek to be seen as good, and there is a universe of difference between the two. The louder and more performative their virtue, the more likely it is that this performance is compensating for a significant inner void or a hidden hypocrisy. Genuine goodness is quiet. It doesn't require an audience or applause because it is rooted in character, not in reputation. When someone's virtue seems to be shouted from the rooftops, you should always wonder what they are trying to drown out. The fifth truth is a paradigm shift that will fundamentally change how you interpret deception. People do not lie to you first. They lie to themselves first. The familiar refrains of, "I'm fine, it doesn't bother me," or "I'm completely over it," are rarely malicious deceptions aimed at you. They are mantras of self-preservation, lines that the person has repeated to themselves so many times that they have started to believe them, or at least desperately want to. Nietzsche saw this kind of self-deception not as an evil act, but as a necessary psychological defense mechanism, a way for the mind to shield itself from a reality that is too painful to fully integrate. So, when someone's story feels inconsistent or their emotions seem disconnected from their words, your first assumption shouldn't be that they are trying to manipulate you. Instead, realize that you are witnessing the external result of an internal battle. They have been telling themselves this story for far longer than they have been telling it to you, and the cracks in their narrative are your clearest window into the truth they are hiding from. Our final truth in this first section is a powerful key to unlocking the dynamics of ego and status. Where a person feels a need to assert their superiority, they are almost always hiding a profound sense of inferiority. Nietzsche was a master at dissecting the fragile architecture of the ego, and he understood that a genuine sense of self-worth doesn't need to announce itself. The person who constantly steers the conversation back to their achievements, their intelligence, or their possessions is not operating from a place of strength. They are operating from a place of fear. The fear that without these external validations, they are fundamentally not enough. The individual who casually belittles others, whether through sarcasm or condescension, is often trying to elevate their own precarious position by pushing others down. True confidence is calm and expansive. It doesn't need to compete because it is not threatened by the existence of others. It simply is. So, when you encounter someone with a desperate need to dominate, to control the narrative, or to prove their worth, look past the intimidating facade. More often than not, you will find a frightened child, terrified of being seen as small, insignificant, or powerless. By now, you should start to feel a subtle shift in your perception. You're beginning to move beyond the surface-level chatter and see the underlying mechanics of human interaction. The constant interrupter might not be arrogant, but terrified of being invisible. The person whose social media is a relentless highlight reel of joy may not be bragging, but sending out a coded signal of their loneliness. You are learning to listen to the body, to the energy, to the silence, not just the sentences. This is not a tool for judgment. It is a tool for compassion. The clearer you see the fear and fragility that drive most human behavior, the harder it becomes to hold on to anger or resentment. Nietzsche didn't want you to see through people so you could exploit them. He wanted you to see through them so you could stop being fooled by them, and perhaps begin to truly connect with them. If this is already changing the way you see the world, drop a comment below and share a moment when you realize someone's actions were telling a completely different story than their words. And be sure to subscribe, because we've only just scratched the surface. In the next part, we're going to examine what happens when these carefully constructed masks begin to crack. It is one thing to recognize that a mask exists. It is another thing entirely to watch it fracture in real time. If you've ever paid close attention during a tense conversation, you've seen these moments. It's a flash of raw anger in someone's eyes before they force a smile, the way their posture tightens when a sensitive topic is broached, the nervous habit that suddenly appears when they feel exposed. These are not random glitches in performance. They are seismic signals from the inner world, moments where the carefully managed persona fails and the raw, unfiltered self breaks through. In our first part, we laid the groundwork by understanding the masks people wear. Hey, in part 2, we venture deeper into the fault lines, the places where those masks begin to crumble. Nietzsche believed the self was not a static entity but a constant, fluid performance. The moments it is threatened are the moments the truth spills out. Let's begin with a truth that underpins nearly all human action. Most behaviors are driven by unconscious fear. This is far more pervasive than we like to admit. Take a moment to think about common behaviors. Why does someone compulsively over-explain a simple point? Why does another person dominate every conversation, leaving no room for anyone else? Why does someone agree to a request with a smile while their entire body radiates resentment? The answer, in most cases, is fear. It's the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being ignored, the fear of rejection, the fear of appearing incompetent. Nietzsche understood that humans are not primarily rational creatures motivated by pure logic or noble desire. We are creatures of avoidance, driven by a primal need to evade loss of status, loss of security, loss of love, loss of self-worth. To read someone accurately, you must stop focusing on what they claim they want and start asking yourself, what are they terrified of losing? The answer to that question is where their true motivation resides. This brings us to our next truth, which builds directly on the idea of projection we touched on earlier. Criticism is almost always a confession. The next time you find yourself in the presence of someone who is a chronic critic of their colleagues, their friends, society at large, listen with a different kind of air. The man who scoffs at others for being too emotional is often a man who is deeply terrified of the intensity of his own feelings, which he has learned to suppress. The woman who relentlessly belittles other people for their choices might be locked in a secret, agonizing war with her own regrets. Nietzsche was adamant that our judgments of others are rarely about the other person. They are a reflection of the parts of ourselves that we have disowned, repressed, or refused to confront. So, when you hear a pattern of harsh criticism, don't get distracted by the person being targeted. Instead, see it as a map. Trace a line of fire back to the person speaking and ask, what part of themselves are they trying to destroy by attacking it in someone else? This isn't just a defense mechanism. It's an unconscious cry for help, pointing directly to the source of their own inner turmoil. Now, consider a specific type of performance, the person who seems unshakably certain. You've met them. They are always composed, always in control, and speak with an air of absolute authority. But if you observe them long enough, especially under pressure, you'll see the subtle tells, the rigid posture, the way they over-prepare for simple tasks, the flash of defensiveness when questioned. This reveals our ninth truth. Excessive confidence is often guilt in costume. Nietzsche observed this pattern in figures of authority, preachers, politicians, academics, people whose role demanded a performance of certainty. He saw that this ironclad confidence was often a psychological armor built to conceal a deep-seated guilt or insecurity. Perhaps it's guilt over a past mistake, a secret they carry, or the gnawing feeling that they are an imposter who is just one misstep away from being exposed. True, quiet confidence comes from a place of inner peace and acceptance. It is flexible and open to being wrong. The brittle, performative confidence that needs to be constantly asserted as a defense. So, when you encounter someone who seems almost too self-assured, don't be intimidated. Get curious. What are they working so hard to convince you, and themselves, of? This idea of overcompensation is a powerful lens, and it brings us our 10th truth, which is subtle but incredibly revealing. People betray their hidden insecurities through exaggeration. Listen for the absolutes in someone's language. The person who constantly declares, "I honestly don't care what anyone thinks about me," is almost certainly someone who cares a great deal. Their declaration is not a statement of fact, but an attempt to convince themselves. The individual who insists, "I'm always happy, negativity just doesn't affect me," is likely someone who is struggling with, and perhaps terrified of, their own darker emotions. Exaggeration is a telltale sign that the ego is working overtime to suppress a contradictory inner truth. Nietzsche viewed extremism in any form not as a sign of strength, but as evidence of profound imbalance. When someone's statements are too sweeping, too absolute, too black and white, learn to disregard the literal content. Instead, read the underlying need. Their volume is an attempt to silence their own doubt. Let's talk about control. We all seek a degree of control over our lives, but for some, it becomes an obsession. This is a critical sign. Our 11th truth is this. Those who obsessively seek external control are often compensating for a terrifying sense of inner chaos. Nietzsche saw this dynamic with crystal clarity. When a person's inner world, their emotions, their thoughts, their sense of self, feels disordered and unpredictable, they project that need for order onto the external world. This is a micromanager who needs to approve every tiny detail, the friend who panics if plans change at the last minute, the partner who tries to control your behavior to soothe their own anxiety. Their actions don't stem from a place of strength or authority. They stem from a desperate fear that if they loosen their grip for even a moment, their entire world, both internal and external, will collapse. Instead of seeing the controlling person as a tyrant to be feared, see them as someone deeply frightened, clinging to rigidity because they lack inner stability. The stricter the outer shell, the more fragile the self within. I want to share a brief story about a man I once knew named Arthur. Arthur was a project manager, and he was infamous for his micromanagement. He would check his team's work 3 times a day, rewrite emails to optimize a single word, and demand detailed reports on the most trivial tasks. His team felt suffocated and distrusted, seeing him as a petty dictator. But one day, after a particularly stressful project launch, Arthur let something slip. He mentioned that his first major job out of college had ended in disaster. He had been given autonomy on a big account, missed a critical detail, and the company lost a huge client. He was fired publicly and felt a sense of shame so profound it had haunted him for over 2 decades. In that moment, his behavior was recontextualized. His obsession with control wasn't about power over his team. It was a desperate, ongoing attempt to prevent that past trauma from ever happening again. He wasn't managing his team. He was managing his fear. Understanding this didn't excuse his behavior, but it replaced his team's resentment with a degree of compassion, allowing them to address the issue from a place of understanding rather than anger. Our final truth for this section is one of Nietzsche's most modern and haunting insights. The louder the performance, the emptier the core. Consider the landscape of social media, with its endless performance of success, happiness, and adventure. The constant updates, the carefully curated photos, the relentless look-at-me energy. Nietzsche would not have seen this as a sign of fulfilling life. He would have seen it as a sign of desperation. When a person's life becomes a constant performance for an invisible audience, it's often because they lack a stable, internal sense of self-worth. They rely on external validation, likes, comments, shares, to feel that they exist, that they matter. The performance is not a celebration of their life, but a substitute for it. The person who is truly at peace with themselves, who feels whole and integrated, does not feel a compulsive need to be watched. So when you see a life that looks more like a television show than a reality, remember this. It is often not a demonstration of power, but a quiet whisper of a deep and unmet need for connection and love. You're probably starting to feel it now, the way these truths layer on top of one another. You walk into a meeting and see the person who over-explains their point, and you sense their fear of being seen as incompetent. You scroll past a friend's exaggerated post about their perfect life, and you feel a pang of compassion for the loneliness they might be trying to cover. You are no longer just reading words. You are reading motivations. You are reading fear. You are reading pain. Nietzsche has given you a flashlight to illuminate the dark corners of the human psyche. This is a profound skill, but it is also a profound responsibility. Because once you see the fear behind the anger and the guilt behind the arrogance, you can no longer hold on to simple judgments. Reading people clearly is not about gaining an advantage. It is about offering grace. And if this section has opened your eyes, prepare yourself for the final part. We are about to strip away the last layer and look directly at the wounds that shape the soul. By this point, something fundamental inside you has likely shifted. You no longer see people as simple, one-dimensional characters. You see the masks they wear and the cracks that reveal the truth beneath. You are reading them not as heroes or villains, but as complex human beings, each fighting a private battle. But we are not finished, because behind every behavior, there's a belief. And behind every belief, there is a wound. This final part of our journey is about learning to recognize the soul, the deep, formative story that runs silently beneath the surface of everyone you will ever meet. Nietzsche was not just interested in exposing people's patterns. He was driven to understand where those patterns originated. Now, let's finish what we started and illuminate the very core of human motivation. Here is our 13th truth, and it is a radical one. No one speaks from a place of pure logic. They speak from a place of pain. You might believe that people are rational actors, that they form their opinions based on facts and build their arguments on a foundation of reason. Nietzsche believed this was a naive illusion. He argued that beneath every cool, logical assertion lies a hot, emotional wound. A person might declare, "I don't believe in long-term relationships. They're illogical and bound to fail." They are not stating an objective fact. They are building a fortress around a past heartbreak. They construct an entire philosophy based on what hurt them, and then use logic as a cement to hold it together. To truly understand why someone believes what they believe, you cannot just analyze their argument. You must ask, what pain is this belief protecting them from? What did they experience that they have vowed never to feel again? This changes everything. It reframes your entire approach to disagreement. Their opinions are no longer attacks. They are shields. Their arguments are not weapons. They are defenses. And when you see that, you stop reacting and you start understanding. Want a simple, powerful test of someone's true character? Here is the 14th truth. How a person reacts to weakness reveals their true power. Don't watch how they treat their superiors or their equals. That is a performance. Watch, instead, how they treat someone who has made a mistake, someone who is vulnerable, or someone who can offer them nothing in return. Nietzsche believed that genuine strength, what he called will to power, was not about domination but about self-mastery. This mastery is revealed through restraint. If someone mocks or exploits vulnerability, they are broadcasting a deep fear of their own fragility. If they punish small mistakes with disproportionate anger, it's likely they were never allowed to be imperfect themselves. But the person who can witness weakness without contempt, who can sit with another's sadness without needing to fix it, who can offer forgiveness when they could have chosen punishment, that is someone who has won the war within themselves. They have nothing left to prove. So, if you want to read someone's soul, create a situation where compassion is an option. What they do in that moment will tell you everything you need to know about who they truly are, not just who they pretend to be. Consider the person who seems to have an insatiable hunger for the spotlight. Every story is about them. Every gathering must revolve around them. Every decision must acknowledge them. It is easy to label this as narcissism or arrogance, but Nietzsche would urge you to look deeper. The 15th truth is that when someone desperately fears being forgotten, they will relentlessly chase attention. This deep-seated fear is not about vanity, it is about existence. It is a terror of being invisible, of living and dying without leaving any mark on the world, of being erased. The child who felt unseen by their parents becomes the adult who demands to be seen by everyone. They create noise not because they love the sound, but because they cannot bear the silence that confirms their fear of being nothing. Instead of asking for love and validation directly, which feels too vulnerable, they demand it indirectly through performance, through drama, and sometimes through chaos. So, when you encounter someone who seems to be too much, take a step back from your judgment. Ask yourself what they are afraid will happen if they are not enough. Sometimes, the relentless pursuit of attention is not a sign of a big ego, but a cry from a wounded heart. This brings us one of Nietzsche's most challenging and insightful truths, one we often resist seeing in ourselves. The person someone attacks is often the person they secretly envy. People don't always attack out of pure hatred. Very often, they attack out of a painful and frustrated admiration. It is psychologically easier to tear someone down than it is to acknowledge that they possess a quality or have achieved a success that you desire but feel you can never attain. The person who relentlessly criticizes someone for being confident, who gossips viciously about someone who is living freely, or who tries to find flaws in someone's success is not just being malicious. They are in pain. Seeing another person embody potential that you have abandoned in yourself is a constant, painful reminder of what you have given up. So, rather than using their success as inspiration, they attempt to destroy it, to pull it down to their level to ease their own sense of failure. Envy is simply unspoken desire. It is a soul crying out, "I want that too, but I don't believe it's possible for me." If you can see this dynamic in others, you become immune to their petty attacks. If you can see it in yourself, you can reclaim the desires you've been projecting and finally begin to pursue them. I want to tell you about a woman I knew years ago. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was a brilliant artist, but she worked a corporate job she disliked. In our group of friends was another woman, Maria, who had quit her job to become a full-time painter. Maria struggled financially, but she was happy and creatively fulfilled. Sarah was relentlessly critical of Maria. She would mock her irresponsibility, criticize her technique, and predict her inevitable failure. It was vicious and uncomfortable for everyone. But one evening, after a few glasses of wine, Sarah confessed. She admitted that seeing Maria pursue her art every day was like a knife in her heart. It reminded her of a dream she had been too afraid to chase herself. Her attacks on Maria weren't about Maria at all. They were attacks on her own fear and regret. She envied Maria's courage so much that she had to try and crush it. That confession was a turning point. Recognizing her envy for what it was, a signpost pointing back to her own passion, allowed her to finally start painting again, not in competition with Maria, but in communion with her own neglected soul. We often say, people don't change, but Nietzsche might have corrected that to, people repeat. This is our 17th truth. People act out their childhood scripts, not their conscious beliefs. We are all living out the roles we were assigned, the fears we were taught, and the emotional dynamics we could never escape. The person who was never listened to as a child becomes the adult who either never stops talking or remains perpetually silent. The person who was punished for showing emotion becomes the adult who is cold, detached, and prizes logic above all else. The person who had to perform to earn love becomes the adult who is a chronic people pleaser, unable to accept affection that doesn't feel earned. They believe they are making conscious choices based on their values, but they are often just reenacting the past on a new stage. If you truly want to read someone, don't just look at who they are today. Ask yourself, who did they have to be to survive their childhood? Because all behavior is biography, and inside every adult is a child still seeking the safety, love, or recognition they never received. This brings us to our final and most powerful truth, the one that ties everything together. A person's patterns are confession if you know how to listen. People may not have the words or the courage to articulate their deepest wounds, but they will show you. They will show you again and again and again through their repeated behaviors. The person who consistently sabotages relationships right as they become intimate is confessing their terror of abandonment. The person who works relentlessly to avoid a moment of stillness is confessing their fear of what they will find in the silence. The person who flirts with everyone but connects with no one is confessing their deep-seated belief that they are unworthy of real love. These are not random habits. They are solutions to past problems that no longer exist. They are telling you, this is how I learned to protect myself. They are showing you, this is where I was hurt. They are demonstrating, this is the pain I am terrified of repeating. Nietzsche believed that if you could learn to listen to patterns instead of words, you could hear the truth long before it is ever spoken. When you can do that, something miraculous happens. You stop taking things personally. You stop judging. You start understanding. You become a mirror for their humanity, not a hammer for their faults. And that, more than any other skill, is what makes you truly powerful. Now, take a quiet moment and let all of this settle. Every truth we have explored today was never just about reading other people. Each one was a mirror, reflecting your own masks, your own fears, your own patterns, your own childhood scripts. The journey to see others with clarity is inseparable from the journey to see yourself. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new way of being in the world, one where you are an active observer of the deep and beautiful complexity of the human spirit. Nietzsche didn't give us these insights to make us cynical observers. He gave them to us so we might awaken to the truth that everything we judge in others is a part of ourselves we have yet to face, and everything we admire in others is a potential within ourselves we have yet to realize. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you've seen yourself or someone you know in these truths, don't let that insight fade away. Share your experience in the comments below. Which of these 18 truths struck you the most profoundly? In a world of performances, let's create a space for honesty. And if this video has given you a new lens through which to see the world, subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. This is only the beginning of our work together to see what is hidden, and in doing so, become who we are truly meant to be. Remember that beneath every mask is a human being, just like you, trying their best to feel safe. See that, and you see everything.